The first time she stood on my beach and told me it wasn't mine anymore, I honestly thought it was a joke. Salt wind whipped across the sand. The old house groaned behind me. And this stranger in designer, sunglasses pointed at my crumbling porch, like she was reading from a deed. "This property belongs to the association now," she said, loud enough for the gulls to hear. That moment hooked me, because nothing wakes you up faster than someone calmly claiming your life's work as theirs. Stay with me, because what she tried next turned a quiet shoreline into a legal and personal storm I never expected. That beach house wasn't pretty. It leaned a little toward the water, its paint peeled by years of sun and storms, and the steps creaked like they were telling secrets. But it was mine. I'd inherited it from my father, who'd rebuilt it twice after hurricanes and once after a fire. Every crack in the walls had a memory. I kept it standing not because it was valuable, but because it mattered. The HOA arrived like they owned confidence itself. Clipboards, laminated maps, matching smiles. Karen led them, heels sinking into the sand as she announced that erosion had changed boundaries. According to her, the shoreline shift meant my house now sat on community-managed land. She spoke in that slow, rehearsed tone people use when they expect obedience. I asked for paperwork. She waved a blurry aerial photo printed from the internet. I asked for a survey. She said it was in progress. Then, she said the words that flipped a switch in my head. "You should prepare to vacate." Neighbors watched from a distance, pretending not to stare. I could feel embarrassment and anger mixing in my chest. Not because I doubted my ownership, but because she assumed I would. Karen walked closer, inspecting my sagging railings. Smiling like decay proved her point. "This place is unsafe anyway," she said. "The HOA will handle it." That night I couldn't sleep. The tide crept higher than usual, waves chewing at the supports. The house groaned, but it held. I pulled out every document I had. Deeds, surveys, insurance maps older than Karen herself. The more I read, the clearer it became. She wasn't mistaken. She was testing me. And that's when I decided this wasn't just about a house. It was about boundaries, history, and what happens when someone thinks confidence can replace the truth. By morning, the beach looked calmer, but my head was anything but. I brewed coffee and watched the tide pull back, exposing damp sand and rusted debris the waves usually hid. That house had survived worse than an HOA with a clipboard. Still, I knew confidence alone wouldn't stop. Karen, people like her didn't retreat when challenged. They doubled down. 2 days later, she returned. This time, she brought a man, in a polo shirt carrying a measuring wheel and another with a drone case. No hello, no courtesy, just purpose. Karen announced they were conducting a preliminary assessment for safety and ownership. I told them they were trespassing. She smiled, the kind that means she's already rehearsed her response. "The HOA has authority here," she said, as if repetition could make it real. I stepped between them and the porch. The boards groaned under my boots, reminding me how fragile the place looked to outsiders. Karen gestured toward a sagging corner post. "This structure is failing," she said loudly. "If it collapses, it becomes a liability, and liabilities fall under our jurisdiction." The logic was thin, but her confidence was thick enough to fool anyone unfamiliar with property law. I pulled out my phone and recorded everything. Names, faces, statements. When Karen noticed, her tone shifted. She accused me of being hostile. She suggested I was hiding something. Then she dropped her next move. The HOA would issue a notice declaring the house abandoned due to disrepair. Abandoned. The word hit harder than I expected. That afternoon, a notice appeared on my door. Bright paper. Official language. It cited safety concerns, community standards, and pending ownership review. No signature, just an HOA logo. I peeled it off and laughed, but it wasn't funny. If they posted it once, they'd post it again. And next time, they'd bring consequences. I spent the evening calling professionals. A surveyor who knew coastal boundaries. A structural engineer who specialized in old shoreline homes. A local attorney who'd fought HOAs before. Each conversation ended the same way. "You're right to act fast." Apparently, erosion disputes were the HOA's favorite gray area. Confusion worked in their favor. 3 days later, Karen escalated. She emailed neighbors, warning them that my house posed a community risk. She implied collapse, contamination, even injury. Suddenly, I wasn't just defending my property. I was defending my reputation. That's when I realized her strategy. If she couldn't legally take the house, she'd socially isolate it, pressure me into surrender, make me the problem everyone wanted gone. Standing on the beach at sunset, watching shadows stretch across warped boards, I made a decision. If Karen wanted a lesson, I'd give her one. But it wouldn't be loud or reckless. It would be precise, documented, and impossible to ignore. The lesson began with patience. Karen expected panic, angry emails, maybe a desperate compromise. Instead, she got silence. For a full week, I said nothing publicly. I let the notice hang in the air while I gathered facts. The surveyor arrived first, planting flags along the sand like quiet punctuation marks. He worked through tides and wind, confirming what my father had always said. The property line moved less than people claimed, and my house still sat firmly on my land. Next came the structural engineer. He crawled beneath the house, inspected beams darkened by salt but still solid, and documented every support. His report didn't deny the damage. It explained it: age, exposure, repair history. The conclusion was clear. The house was old, not abandoned, and not in imminent danger of collapse. That distinction mattered. Karen, meanwhile, kept pushing. She scheduled an HOA walkthrough and sent invites like summonses. I declined. She left voicemails warning of fines and emergency action. I saved them all. When people overplay authority, they often provide the evidence themselves. The turning point came when I received an invoice. Not a fine, an invoice. The HOA had billed me for preliminary, stabilization planning, claiming they'd already contracted services for my property. That crossed the line. You can threaten ownership all day, but you don't spend someone else's money without consequences. My attorney sent one letter. It was polite, brief, and devastating. It included the survey, the engineering report, the deed chain, and a timeline of Karen's actions. It cited trespass, defamation, and attempted conversion of property. It also requested a full HOA board meeting, on record, with minutes. Karen had wanted authority. Now she had scrutiny. The meeting took place in a community hall overlooking the beach. Karen sat stiffly at the front, confidence replaced by tension. I spoke calmly, presenting documents one by one. No accusations. Just facts. The room shifted as neighbors realized they'd been fed a narrative. Not the truth. When Karen argued erosion again, the surveyor explained coastal law. When she questioned safety, the engineer clarified standards. Each time she spoke, someone else quietly corrected her. Authority evaporates quickly when exposed to daylight. Then I asked one question. Why did the HOA invoice me for work on property it doesn't own? The silence that followed was louder than the waves outside. Board members looked at each other. One asked Karen to explain. She couldn't. By the end of the meeting, the notice was withdrawn. The invoice was canceled, and the board requested Karen step down pending review. Walking back to the house that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. The lesson wasn't about winning. It was about showing that old foundations, when documented and defended, still hold. You'd think that would have been the end of it. But people who lose power rarely accept it quietly. Karen didn't step down gracefully. She vanished for a few weeks, long enough for the beach to settle. Back into routine and for neighbors to stop whispering. I focused on repairs, reinforcing the weakest pilings and replacing boards the engineer had flagged. The house felt steadier, like it knew it had survived another storm. Then the letter arrived. Not from the HOA this time, but from a law firm in the city. Karen was suing me personally. The claim was absurd and carefully worded. Emotional distress, unsafe conditions, and loss of expected property use. According to her filing, she had been harmed by exposure to my deteriorating house while performing her duties. She wasn't claiming ownership anymore. She was claiming victimhood. My attorney laughed when he read it, but he also took it seriously. Lawsuits don't have to be true to be expensive. Karen was betting I'd settle to avoid the hassle. Instead, we responded with evidence. Photos, reports, emails, recordings. Even the drone footage her own team had taken, which showed posted warnings and intact structures. Her case relied on feelings. Mine relied on facts. The deposition was where the story truly unraveled. Karen arrived polished and confident, but the questions were simple. When had she first believed the house was hers? What documents supported that belief? Why had she entered the property without permission? Why had she invoiced work without ownership? Each answer contradicted the last. Confidence turned brittle under repetition. When asked about the emotional distress, she described fear and humiliation. Then the attorney played her voicemail, the one where she'd laughed and said, "He'll cave eventually." The room went quiet. That recording did more than any argument could. It showed intent. A month later, the lawsuit was dismissed. Not quietly either. The judge issued a brief opinion noting lack of standing and warning against frivolous claims. Karen was ordered to cover costs. It wasn't revenge. It was accountability. The HOA sent a formal apology. New leadership acknowledged the overreach and revised their coastal policy to require independent verification before any boundary claims. It didn't fix the stress, but it prevented the same mistake from happening again. Standing on the porch one evening, watching the sun sink into the water, I realized something. The house still leaned. The paint still peeled. But it stood because it was meant to, because it was cared for, not because someone declared it valuable. Karen wanted a hard lesson. She got one. Not from me, but from the truth she tried to ignore. And the beach, indifferent as ever, kept doing what it always does, reshaping everything except the facts. The beach house still creaks at night, especially when the tide comes in heavy and the wind pushes salt through every crack. But now, the sound feels different. It isn't anxiety anymore. It's history breathing. After everything settled, I stayed there more often, waking up early to watch the shoreline shift inch by inch, the same way it always has. Nothing about the land changed because of Karen. Only the noise around it did. Neighbors slowly returned to normal. Some apologized for believing the rumors. Others admitted they'd been afraid to speak up. I didn't hold it against them. HOA pressure works because it feeds on silence. Once that silence breaks, the whole structure weakens. The board followed through on reforms. Boundary claims now required certified surveys, legal review, and owner consent. Emergency powers were stripped down to actual emergencies. Karen's name was never mentioned again, but her shadow lingered in every policy footnote. Lessons tend to do that. I finished the repairs I'd started, not to prove anything, but because the house deserved it. New bracing under the porch, fresh sealant along the worst seams. I left the weathered look intact. Strength doesn't always need polish. Sometimes it needs honesty. One afternoon, a storm rolled in fast. Dark clouds, sudden wind, the kind that used to make me worry. I stood inside and listened as rain hammered the roof. The house held. It always had. The difference now was confidence, earned through action instead of assumption. Months later, I heard Karen had moved. Different community, different HOA. I wondered briefly if she'd learned anything, then let the thought go. Growth isn't something you can enforce. You can only remove the lies that make it unnecessary. What stayed with me wasn't the lawsuit or the meetings. It was the moment she first claimed my house with a smile and no proof. That moment taught me something valuable. Confidence without grounding is just noise. Real authority is quiet, documented, and patient. People ask why I didn't sell after all that trouble. The answer is simple. This place isn't an investment. It's a boundary. One drawn by law, history, and care. When someone tries to erase that, they're not just taking property. They're testing whether you know what's yours. As the sun sets now, the porch casts long shadows across the sand. The house still leans toward the water, stubborn and familiar. It hasn't won anything. It's simply still here. And sometimes, that's the hardest lesson of all for anyone who thought confidence alone could wash it away.